what do you think? Are we going to talk about this lesson? When we say molecular basis of inheritance. So children, in our previous lesson, we already learned about the basics of genetics. We already saw that how the traits get inherited from one generation to the next generation. We talked about the variations which come into the picture due to the recombination. So we looked at the Mendel's rule of inheritance, and we also looked at the Morgan's rule, that is the chromosomal basis of inheritance, right? So here in this lesson, we will try to look at the process of inheritance but little deeper level. So here what we are trying to see is what exactly or what is the molecule inside an organism which is responsible for the phenomenon, that is the inheritance. So it has been found that DNA acts as genetic material for most of the organisms. So DNA, that is deoxyribonucleic acid. Remember, most of the organisms, not all the organisms. So exceptions are there, like for example virus, where DNA is not the genetic material, rather RNA is the genetic material. Now here I am just telling you, okay? So DNA is the one which is responsible for all this inheritance. Now it did not come in dream of any of the scientists that yes, DNA is the one, right? A lot of research was done to find out which molecule is actually the genetic material. And we will study all that. We will study that how the scientist came up with the fact that DNA is the genetic material. Then we look at that how DNA actually transfers trait from one generation to the next generation. So we will see the entire process of inheritance but at the molecular level. When we say molecular level, so DNA is the molecule. So at the level of DNA, now how DNA helps in inheritance. Now children, as we all know that each and every living organism is made up of a large number of cells. If we closely look at the structure of cell, you see that there is a nucleus which contains all the genetic material. So inside the nucleus, you see the nucleolus, the thin thread-like structures which are called chromatin, right? And these chromatin later condense to form the structure that is known as chromosome. And these chromosomes are located and on these chromosomes located the genes, right? So that thing we have studied in the previous chapter. And each chromosome have thousands of genes, and each of those genes have a particular trait. Maybe one gene can be for eye color, another gene for the hair color, another gene is for the skin color. So that means each gene point for a particular trait, and the number of chromosomes which is present inside each cell of living organisms, that is the fix, right? So we all are aware that the number of chromosome which is present in the organism is fixed. The number of the chromosome is fixed. For example, in the case of human beings, they have a total number of 46 chromosomes in each cell. That is 23 pair of homologous chromosome in each cell. So the number of chromosomes are fixed, but the number of genes which are present on each chromosome, that is very huge. That can be the thousands. Number of chromosome varies from one species to another species. Children, that thing we already discussed, right? All the things we have discussed, right? So like as I just mentioned that the number of chromosome varies from a species to another species. Like if you compare a number of chromosomes of human beings to Drosophila, you will see that they are quite different. Now children, when we talk about the genes, what exactly this gene is made up of, right? What is there who decide the role of gene? So this is actually made up of the double-stranded structure called DNA. Yes, DNA. And some portion of DNA is responsible for a particular trait. Now children, let us suppose the portion of DNA which is responsible for the hair color, right? Let us suppose this is the DNA and this portion is responsible for hair color. This portion of gene of chromosome is responsible for eye color, and this portion of chromosome is responsible, the genes which are located in this portion is responsible for skin color, right? So now what do we mean when we say this portion corresponds to this trait? That means the portion of DNA will actually help in the synthesis of proteins which will decide the color of your hair, right? Like children, as I said, and this portion correspond with the hair color. इसका क्या मतलब है? इसका मतलब ये है that this portion of the DNA actually synthesize some proteins and those proteins decide the hair color. This portion of the DNA synthesize some of the protein and those protein decide the eye color. This portion of the DNA synthesize some protein which actually decide the color of the skin, right? Because it all dependent on protein synthesis, in turn dependent on DNA. Now from this lesson, this is what we are going to study here. How DNA impact protein synthesis, how protein synthesis happens from DNA. So during the first half of the lesson, we will spend time to understand what is genetic material and how was it proved that DNA acts as the genetic material. Because there are quite few other molecules which are present inside our cell with their protein, carbohydrate, lipids, DNA, RNA and like this. How do we know that among all these, DNA is the only one that can act as the genetic material? So the entire story which we are going to talk about here is why DNA is the genetic material. We will see that why DNA is the genetic material, why DNA is considered as the genetic material. Now what is the role of RNA then? Now if we say that in most of the organism it is DNA which is the genetic material, then you might think that we don't need RNA. But it is not like that, children. Even RNA plays a very crucial role. So we have to look at the role of RNA and we have to see that how protein synthesis is dependent on DNA. Now in order to understand all this, we should be very clear about the structure and function of both DNA as well as RNA. So some of the questions that might be there in your mind would get answered towards end of this lesson, like, right? How DNA controls trait. Now when we say, okay, children, DNA is a double-stranded structure present in the nucleus of cell. So common question that comes in your mind is how will DNA control the trait? Because it is present inside the cell. So how it control the eye color, how it control the hair color as well as the skin color, right? So the next question that comes in your mind is how protein synthesis related to DNA. The third question would be what is the role of RNA? If we say DNA is the genetic material, then why do we have RNA? What is RNA doing there? So these are some of the very common questions which will answered in this lesson. Okay, and in order to understand all these things, it is very important to understand the structure of DNA and RNA appropriately. So for that we will get some knowledge about the nucleic acids, like what are nucleic acids. So as you all know that nucleic acids are nothing but biomolecules. You have studied in your class 11 also. right? So we already spoke in class 11th where we studied about the proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, right? So nucleic acid is a group of biomolecule under which we have two important nucleic acid, that is DNA and RNA. So these nucleic acids play a very important role in the process of inheritance. So we will talk about DNA and RNA. So as I say, DNA is what? DNA is the deoxyribonucleic acid and it is double-stranded structure. What do we mean by double-stranded structure? Means two ribbon-like structure. So when we talk about the structure of DNA, it is something like that, two ribbon-like structure, right? That wrapped around each other. The other one is RNA. Talking about the RNA is the ribonucleic acid. Similar structure to DNA, but it does not have two strands. It just have one strand, something like that, right? Single stranded structure it is. So these are two nucleic acids which we are going to talk about in detail. So now we will focus our study only in the structure of DNA and RNA. So let us start with the DNA. First, what is DNA? As I said, it is deoxyribonucleic acid. It is double-stranded helical structure. So what do you mean by helical structure? What is the helix-like structure actually? Helix structure is something like this. It is something like this, right? So anything which is wrapped around each other, coiled around the axis, known as helical structure. So if you have a rod-like structure like this, if you have the rod-like structure and you wrap a ribbon around it, then you say that it is the helix which is formed. So we say that DNA is the double helical structure. DNA is a polymer, right? It is the polymer. Now what do you mean by polymer? Children, any such molecule which is formed by combining a lot of molecule or the lot of monomers, that means small molecules unite together and form a polymer. That structure is known as polymer, right? A monomeric unit is somewhat like this is the monomer, this is monomer, this is monomer, and this is monomer. When they combine together and a complete unit which is formed, it is known as polymer. So children, talking about the DNA, so it is polynucleotide chain because small nucleotides join together and form polynucleotide. Poly means many, polymer means many monomer, polynucleotide means many nucleotide. So the monomer unit of DNA, the monomeric unit of the DNA is the nucleotide. जो DNA होता है वो कई सारे न्यूक्लियोटाइड से मिलके बनता है. As I said, many simple units together and form polymer. So children, the length of DNA is determined the number of nucleotide which is present in it. It is something like this. Let us suppose these are the nucleotides, right? So these circles are what? They are the nucleotides. Now when these monomeric unit join together, right? So what do you get? You get a polymer, right? Now more the number of monomer, the length of the polymer keep on increasing. जितने ज़्यादा न्यूक्लियोटाइड प्रेजेंट होंगे, मोनोमेरिक यूनिट प्रेजेंट होंगी, डीएनए की लेंथ भी उतनी ही ज़्यादा होगी. अगर मोनोमेरिक यूनिट कम प्रेजेंट है तो डीएनए की लेंथ भी कम होगी, राइट? नाउ लेट अस सी आरएनए. आरएनए के बारे में अगर हम बात करते हैं तो आरएनए क्या है? आरएनए इज व्हाट? आरएनए इज द राइबोज न्यूक्लिक एसिड. सो व्हाट इज आरएनए? आरएनए की अगर हम बात करते हैं, आरएनए की बात करें तो आरएनए इज व्हाट? आरएनए इज राइबोज न्यूक्लिक एसिड. It is the single stranded structure, unlike DNA has two strands, right? Now ever it is also that RNA is also a polymer. RNA भी एक polymer है और उसकी monomeric unit क्या है? RNA भी एक polymer है और उसकी एक मोनोमर यूनिट क्या कहलाती है? उसकी एक मोनोमर यूनिट कहलाती है ribonucleotide. Got it, children? So this is about DNA and RNA. So in our next video, we will see the structure of nucleotide in more detail. So till then, have a nice day and thank you.